Welcome everyone to this webinar. We are pleased to have you with us today. We're going to be talking about accelerating long duration energy storage technologies in Australia. We're very lucky to be able to speak with Anish Muchhala today from ARENA, and he's investment lead for grid and storage. I'll just hand over to you myself. I am Diana Barry from the GreenTech Hub. And a little bit about us, we are currently running a long duration energy storage challenge, which is seeking input from parties all around Australia and the world who are looking to develop technologies in long duration energy storage. And that's why we thought it's very pertinent to talk to Anish today and to talk a little bit about the work of ARENA and about long duration energy storage in Australia, and go into a bit more depth about that. So I might just kick off to welcome you, Anish. Thank you so much for coming and joining with us today. And would you like to start off by giving us a bit about your background and also some background about ARENA and the work you are currently doing, and in particular, the focus you have on long duration energy storage?
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks, Diana. I appreciate the opportunity from GreenTech Hub to talk a little bit about the work we're doing and what we're seeing in LDES. Yeah, so as you mentioned, Anish Muchhala, I'm an investment lead in the grid and storage vertical here at ARENA. My background is in venture capital and growth investing, so have looked at many LDES technologies both here and globally. Have mostly been in climate for the better part of the last few years, and then before that, did my time at some of the investment banks as well, covering the mining and energy space. So very much from a commercial or a corporate finance background. Joined ARENA about a touch over 6 months ago, and really saw the opportunity that was in front of us to emissions and is clearly a really big problem that we're facing. Climate change is clearly a really big problem that our generation and our kids' generation will face, but it's also a massive opportunity. And so to be at the coalface of, no pun intended, but to be on the front lines of that and having the opportunity to push forward innovative projects is really a privilege. So yeah, enjoying my time here, and maybe to give your audience a little bit more color on what ARENA does. ARENA actually stands for Australian Renewable Energy Agency. I think a lot of people think that means we just fund solar and wind farms. We don't. The mandate is quite a bit broader than that, and it ranges from things from deployment through to the manufacturing side of things. We obviously do a lot of work in solar. We have pretty clear verticals and strategies around hydrogen, critical minerals. And the area that I spend most of my time in is grid and storage. Within that priority, there is a specific focus on long duration energy storage, and that's come about just through the natural evolution of our energy market and system. ARENA historically has funded lithium-ion batteries. We did a big battery, and I think it was 2021. This is 5 years ago. Lithium-ion batteries were not fashionable 5 years ago. No one saw the value of them, and the business case was perhaps a little bit uncertain, but we knew that storage was going to be a part of a really important part of our energy system, and we decided to fund probably the first tranche of grid scale utility batteries. And looking back at that now, that's been a really wise and impactful program. We've funded pumped hydro in the past as well, and a few other long duration technologies. So the focus for us now is technologies like pumped hydro and lithium ion are fairly commercial scale now, and are funded by the private sector pretty actively. But there is an increasing need for longer durations, 8, 10, 12 hours plus, and that's where we're really focusing our time on. We focus both on the deployment and the manufacturing side of things. So we have a battery breakthrough program that has recently been launched, and our focus is more on manufacturing. Our core rolling program, Advancing Renewables, is more deployment focused. So we're looking for large grid scale deployments of LDES technology. Maybe to give a bit more color on exactly what ARENA does, our main mantra and mission is really to accelerate commercialization of, I suppose, pre-commercial technologies. So anything between TRL 4 to 7 is kind of the sweet spot for ARENA. It's really that valley of death once you've gotten out of the lab and you're ready to scale into the field. That's really the point at which we get involved and where we want to fund projects. It's often the hardest part of the journey for a climate technology. So we try and address the most challenging part, and our funding is pure grant funding. We don't sit on your cap table. There's no interest or anything like that. So it is really there to bridge the gap for pre-commercial technologies and offer a way to get them quicker into the market or the system. There is structure built into the way and certain terms and conditions that are built into our grants. It's not a big lick of capital up front, but yeah, in essence, it's really concessionary funding to help accelerate commercialization. We can talk a little bit more about the process perhaps later on. I generally tend to reserve that for more pointed discussions I have with applicants, but maybe I can save some time towards the end for that. But hopefully it gives you a little bit of colour on what we do.
That's a great overview, explaining how you're bridging the gap there. I was thinking I could ask you a little bit about what your thoughts are on the emerging trends and also the needs for LDES in Australia.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I think emerging is the operative term there. It's no surprise to the people listening on this call that we are quickly and rapidly going towards very high penetration of variable renewable energy. That's obviously has some clear benefits, but it also throws up some pretty big challenges as well. And the key term being variable and dynamic. It's not always clear when we're going to have renewable droughts. The sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. So there is a clear and urgent need, I think, for longer duration storage technologies to manage, things like intermittency, providing intraday or even multi-day sort of load shifting, and just ensuring grid reliability. So I think, in that broader context, it is, I think, apparent to ARENA that we do need some form of long duration storage. The how of it is a little bit more nuanced. We are seeing a pretty diverse set of LDES technologies come to market, or certainly come to us, and they're really alternatives to the lithium-ion value chain. So things like vanadium flow batteries, sodium sulfur batteries, electrochemical plays on the traditional battery. There's all sorts of mechanical storage systems like compressed air or gravity storage, and these technologies really offer unique advantages on which is relevant in a WA context, when you're operating in high temperatures, longer lifespans, and just better suitability for some of our climate conditions. And I think some of your listeners might have also seen a couple of days ago that China's put export controls on lithium-ion batteries. So there's an element of the LDES conversation that is about, well, what happens if we're not able to procure lithium-ion batteries that easily anymore? It's not the case today, but certainly if you read the news flow, it's a very real possibility. And so there's almost a question around, do we need an insurance policy in that event? So I think we're seeing a diverse set of LDES technologies, particularly those with unique capabilities and advantages that fit the Australian environment, but also just a need to get away from or diversify from critical minerals dependent technologies. On the policy front is probably the one where we are seeing a lot of conversation and debate. Some of your listeners might have seen the latest tender of the LTES come out in New South Wales. And I think New South Wales has committed close to 30 gigawatt hours or 28 gigawatt hours from memory for storage. And that program's now shifted to a 4 hour, essentially a 4 hour duration minimum duration requirement, and it wasn't that a few years ago. So the average duration of technologies is already increasing, and that's been driven by policies like the LTESA scheme, and we've also seen South Australia come out with the firm recently as well. So that is starting to create a signal for LDES deployment, even though there's no sort of national target around it. And then globally, you've seen markets like the UK just did a very massive LDES tender. That's a cap and floor scheme, and that's got 3 or 4 technologies built into the scheme as well. So globally, we're seeing, not just in Australia, but globally, we're seeing this need for LDES in a system that's increasingly variable. And then probably the last comment I'll make on that front is just ARENA's done some modeling with a few consultants to really understand the role of LDES under a variety of scenarios. And they're things like what happens if pumped hydro gets delayed further, or what happens if we can't commercialize more gas. We would love a world where we don't have any gas anymore, but that's a hard thing to transition to. But we've modeled what we think is what the system cost looks like under some of those various scenarios. And it's clear to us that LDES becomes critical in some of those cases where firming tech can be delayed or constrained. And we do think that LDES can be a contributor to a lowest cost system. So yeah, a few things there on the technology and policy side, and it's emerging, but from a low base.
Yeah, it just sounds to me like it seems to make sense to be planning and looking so far forward into the future as to what our future needs are going to be. So what do you think the investment market is like currently for LDES technologies in Australia?
I think it's still maturing, and it's cautiously optimistic. I think people recognize the system value of LDES, particularly as you're getting 24 to 100-hour type durations, which is very novel technology. But if we're being honest, I think investor confidence is still not there, simply because you've got high upfront capex, payback periods are still probably a little bit long. There's probably a bit of a lack of clear market signals for long duration, and whilst there are some mechanisms out there, there's still probably a general aura of regulatory uncertainty. And then I think more importantly, at a project level, one of the common things that comes up is I've got a 12-hour technology, I can revenue stack 4 hours worth, and maybe a few other system services, but how do I get full value for a 12-hour system when the market currently only rewards 4 hours? So there's probably not there's not enough clarity, I'd say, on how you really stack revenue models appropriately for a LDES technology or an LDES project. It's certainly enough to make a private fund or an investor compelled. That being said, I think we are seeing some signs of momentum. I think private sector interest is growing. We've had large developers approach us on things like flow batteries and sodium sulfur technologies and other sort of LDES options. So there's certainly private sector interest that's growing. I think you're seeing global players enter Australia on the on the tech side. We're certainly seeing some high-profile startups in this space approach us, and they are attracted by some of the policy, um, capacity schemes and the like, that are coming out. But also Australia as a market for LDES makes a lot of sense. High penetration of renewables and a constrained grid. So yeah, and our job within the market is really, I suppose, a bit of a market maker, and we have funding rounds and programs. We share knowledge on our projects. So ideally, when a project completes that ARENA supported, we want to put knowledge out there and advertise, the benefits of it across the broader market and the system. And we engage with policymakers and project proponents to help sort of de-risk some of this early stage investment and catalyze commercial traction.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary of some of the challenges that are facing LDES technologies. Can you tell me do you think there's some market failure in LDES that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some clear signs of that. I think LDES can provide critical services like, reliability or resilience, and even in the industrial market, for example, like thermal heat storage is a space we're spending a lot of time in through our industrial transformation scheme, and that's really a long duration form of storage for hard to abate industrial sectors. The current market structures don't really reward a lot of those attributes. So there's a little bit of a misalignment between system value and market signals, I'd say. We have some instruments like the LTESA, and the firm that's about to come up, but the reality is there's not a widespread sort of confluence of long-term contracting mechanisms. So you really have to deal with LDES at a project by project, location by location level, and sort of network by network layer. Because there's just no widespread way of doing LDES in Australia.
Absolutely.
And then there's all sorts of other regulatory and procedural complications, treatment of storage and network charging tariffs and the like, and bidding rules. They add further complications to the commercialization piece. But that's where ARENA's really there to sort of address some of those challenges. We don't make policy, but we can certainly help with funding projects that really need to be funded, and are pre-commercial. So, yeah.
Well, I have a question here that I think many people listening on the call or watching this recording, and it's about tips that you may have for commercialization of LDES technologies. Can you share any good tips?
Yeah, there's probably a few. I think you have, if you're a developer, or you've got an LDES, you're a tech vendor, have a really firm and clear idea of the use cases that your technology might really work, where your technology will really work. So, for example, it could be industrial heat, or you've got locations with high thermal risk, which in WA is a concern. Have a real think about what are the most compelling use cases for you to get deployed. And then the ultimate goal, hopefully, is to scale to broader grid level applications. But be very clear on where you think the technology works well and where it doesn't, and tailor your use cases for that. That's something we take a really strong look at. And if we feel that a use case is particularly weak, or we don't see a world where there's real scalability longer term, it's probably not something ARENA will do. ARENA's interest is not to fund one discrete project. It's to fund one discrete project, which then de-risks and unlocks a whole pipeline or wider adoption across the grid. So that's probably the first one. I think be realistic about timelines and scale. we always love people who are dreaming big and want to, want to get to scale quickly. But in this space, you really need to take a fairly staged approach. So have a really robust view on how long you think these projects are going to take and how you get to scale. And important within that scale up is really the cost down trajectory. So I think I mentioned it before, but the CapEx is the part that's always the most challenging. A lot of these technologies have very sophisticated, large plant infrastructure that costs tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, the advantage of some of these technologies is that they don't need a lot of operating overhead or cost. But high CapEx ultimately puts people off. So what you want to show in the scale up piece is that, yes, the first of a kind project might be a little bit elevated in terms of CapEx intensity, but by doing this project, you learn more and you can show a trajectory that at scale, costs will be 20, 30, 40, 50% lower. Because of the learnings and output of that technology. So have a very clear narrative around your scale up and the timelines. I think I mentioned it before, but non-energy benefits are important. Resilience, emissions reduction, system flexibility. That's a real clear advantage of LDES. Yep. So that's key. And then I think on the people aspect of things, engage with regulators and market operators and people like ARENA early. You need to have a concept for what you want to do. You need to have a project, really, to talk to someone like ARENA. But my door, and certainly most people in the investments team here, their doors are always open for a half-an-hour chat. We always want to speak to people in market and learn what they're doing. And we see everything. So there may be a world in which you've come to us with a technology that actually we spoke to a network a week ago, and we think that could be a good fit. So we can maybe help with some of that market making. It's not historically something we've done a lot of, but increasingly it is something we're doing. So engage early, because the regulatory piece is often the piece that takes a really long period of time, and it forms a key part of our diligence as well. So, and then I'd say leverage as many partnerships as you can. So if you've got something interesting, you really want to be speaking to networks and other government agencies, industry folk, universities even. You want to be building those partnerships early. And some of them can offer funding as well. So universities are often great at providing small leaks of funding to help you test a technology. And all these layers of partnership and de-risking help when you ultimately come and ask for a big sum of money from ARENA. They're probably the main things. I think to summarize it, I think it's have a really clear understanding of your technology set, have a clear understanding of your use cases, and make sure that you've really thought about how those use cases are important to ARENA and the system more broadly. Be very robust in terms of your scale up trajectory and the timelines around that, and what you think you can achieve by when. Engage early with as many people as possible. The more validation you get, the more sources of funding you potentially have access to, the better.
Thank you. Those sounds very great tips there. And I might just add there, the Long Game Energy Storage Challenge, which is currently being run by GreenTech Hub in Western Australia, is also an opportunity. So if anyone hasn't checked that out yet, go on to greentechwa.com and have a look at the use cases. There's multiple use cases available. And the application, putting in a submission is quite a short process. The deadline for submissions is 31 October. And what we're really hoping to achieve through the Innovation Challenge is to help support and innovation in long duration energy storage. That's 10 plus hours through to seasonal storage in Western Australia, so suited to Western Australia's unique energy needs. So I encourage you to have a look at that if you haven't checked it out already. Anish, you mentioned people can contact ARENA. Would you like to share how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, my email's always open, so if you've got an interesting LDES technology or a project, always happy to speak to people. So please, by all means, ping me a note on my email. My email's anish.muchala@arena.gov.au. If you don't have it, Diana can send it to you. Always happy to have a conversation. And yeah, good luck.
Thank you, and thank you so much for sharing some of your knowledge and sharing with us a lot of information about ARENA and your role in this space as well. I also encourage people who wish to talk to GreenTech Hub. We're also always interested in having a chat. If you wanted to pick up the phone and give us a call, or shoot us an email, or if you have any questions about the Long Game Energy Storage Challenge, we're very happy to talk to you about that. Thank you, Anish, for your time today, and we hope to talk with you again in future sometime. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Diane.